Hey all, Ron here from Military Images Magazine with a new episode of Life on the Civil War Research Trail. Yesterday, I talked to you about Alexander Shaler, the general who worked his way up from the 7th New York State Militia to command of a brigade in the 6th Corps of the Army of the Potomac, recipient of the Medal of Honor at the Second Battle of Fredericksburg, part of the Chancellorsville campaign, a distinguished and honored soldier. He was also a stickler for discipline. And after the war, he was not alone in noticing that the men, the volunteers, were not particularly skilled at being marksmen. Target practice was pretty much unknown, or at least not well disciplined in the militia, the state militias and the National Guard of New York State and other states as well. So when I was doing my research, I found a reference to him, a minor reference, that he was a founder and early supporter of the National Rifle Association, the NRA. So I did a little bit of digging around to try to find out more about the nature of his relationship. And that led me to learn more about the origins of the NRA. And so, perhaps no surprise, as many things American in the early part of our country's history, we took our cues from England, our form of government, the basis of our form of government, and the idea of a National Rifle Association. In fact, the English version of the NRA was born in 1859. And in one of those early events, Queen Elizabeth, who was a big supporter of the idea of training the militia folks in England, the military folks, I should say, as marksmen and in marksmanship and target practice, was a big and important thing. And there's a moment in time when Queen Elizabeth fires a gun in support of the organization. So it comes to the United States in 1871. And I want to read you this excerpt from an editorial in the New York Times titled "The New Rifle Club." Here we go. This will give you a good sense of the early idea of it and the connection to England. Quote, sometime since we referred to a project for the formation in the city of an association for rifle practice, similar in aim to the well-known National Rifle Association of England. We now know that such a club has been actually organized, and at the low rate of dues which has been fixed, $2 annually, will doubtless attract a large membership. There is no lack of interest in the subject on the part of our citizen soldiers. What has been wanted hitherto was a systematic encouragement and direction of this individual ardor. With one or two exceptions, none of our city militia have made any arrangements for regular practice, nor apparently given the matter any attention at all. The desired impetus will be supplied, we trust, by this new association, which many, perhaps in time to come, will rival in proficiency in numbers its foreign prototype. What gratifying results may be expected from such an enterprise, well organized and zealously carried out, may be seen every year in the wonderful shooting at Wimbledon, where it is no uncommon thing to see accurate marksmanship at so long a range as 1,800 yards. The new association justifies a reasonable hope that in a few years our militiamen will become tolerably expert in the practical use of their weapons. So there you have the account, the reference to England and the success of their National Rifle Association. The NRA in America was founded on November 21st, 1871. On that day, the NRA is incorporated with 15 members. The two biggest names are Ambrose E. Burnside, You'll know him from the his role in the war at the Battle of Fredericksburg in 1862. You might call that the first Battle of Fredericksburg, since Shaler received his Medal of Honor in the Second Battle of Fredericksburg. Burnside, of course, up until that time, was quite the celebrity with his Burnside carbine, leading Rhode Island troops as colonel in First Battle of Bull Run, successful expedition along the North Carolina coast in early 1862. The zenith of his career was probably about that time, and then becoming commander of the Army of the Potomac, which pretty much ended after the disaster at Fredericksburg. Shaler is the other prominent general who's part of this group. The other members are, I'll give you the full list: Ambrose E. Burnside, George W. Wingate, William C. Church, Alexander Shaler, John B. Woodward, Joshua M. Varian, Frederick A. Mason, George Moore Smith, Henry G. Shaw, Augustus Funk, Alfred W. Craven, A. W. Dimmock, Frederick W. Peck, William J. Harding, and John Powell Jr. So that was the day on November 21st. That night, the first meeting was held in the armory of the 22nd New York State National Guard. The charter states, and I'm going to give you just a quote from that charter. It says, the quote, object of the association shall be to promote rifle practice, and for that purpose to provide a suitable range or ranges in the vicinity of New York, and a suitable place for the meetings of the association in the city itself, and to promote the introduction of the National Guard of New York and the militia of the states. Notice states is plural. So even at that time in the founding, there appears to be an idea of going national, truly going national to in fulfillment of its name. So early on, the NRA begins lobbying the state and the federal government for support. Here we are. I'm going to take you just a few months ahead to January 3rd, 1872. This report in a New York newspaper. Quote, since its formation some months ago, the directors have been untiring in their exertions to make the scheme successful, and already assurances of assistance from the governor of the state and his staff, the secretary of war, all the leading men of the National Guard, and many other prominent citizens. The notice continues. In a government like that of the United States, the main defense and strength of the nation must depend mainly upon the organized militia and volunteers. And it is therefore deeply important that instruction and practice in the use of the rifle should be made as general as possible. Now, I'm going to interject here for just a minute. Realize that the Army, the United States Army, and the Navy are pretty darn small. Following the Civil War, they were reduced to their pre-war levels, which is barely enough to cover the domestic United States, the states, and its territories. Let me continue. It has been fully proved from the experience of other nations that a proper course of instruction will assure proficiency in the use of the rifle as well as any other arts. But hitherto, no attempts have been made in this country. No attempts have been made to facilitate the use of the weapon among the National Guards or even the regular troops. In many instances, during times of peace, a man may serve the full term of his enlistment without once using his breech loader or firing a shot. So, my takeaway here is that the National Rifle Association and its predecessor, the English National Rifle Association, were really trying to correct a wrong, which is to introduce the idea of target practice and rewarding marksmanship in the armies, no matter national or state troops or National Guard, to be able to empower them and to reward them for doing good work in training with their weapons. Now, Not everyone is a fan of this idea. As we see in this editorial, it was by a French military observer in the New York Daily Herald. I'm not going to read you the whole thing, but just here's a passage that talks about two of the great powers in the world at that point, France and England. So here we go. I'm going to give you the full passage. Quote, the emperor pointed out that the first mitrailleuse, which is the first machine gun, opens fire. The Queen of England fired the first shot at Wimbledon when the National Rifle Association held its first meeting some 10 years since. It is strange that in a civilized age, the 19th century, two of the most powerful sovereigns in the world should have encouraged their people with their own hand to take good aim for the destruction of human life. But I must not moralize. I am out on the warpath. Arma virumque cano. Now, the Latin phrase that I just mentioned bears transcription. That phrase, arma virumque cano, translates to I sing of arms and the man. This is the opening line of Virgil's epic poem, the Aeneid, which tells the story of Aeneas and the Trojan War. So there you have it, today's research rabbit hole to find out more about General Alexander Shaler and the origins, the American origins of the National Rifle Association. Thanks for listening. We'll see you on the next episode.